They sold millions of records. They changed music forever. And yet, many of them died with almost nothing. Behind the myths of fame and fortune lies a darker truth: broken contracts, stolen royalties, and an industry that moved on when the spotlight faded. Tonight, we uncover the rock legends who gave everything to their art and were left with nothing in return. Jimi Hendrix, millions earned. Nothing left. Jimi Hendrix was one of the highest-paid musicians of his era, redefining the electric guitar and selling out arenas worldwide. Yet behind the explosive success was financial chaos. Poor contracts, aggressive management, and endless touring expenses drained his earnings faster than they arrived. Hendrix rarely controlled his own money, trusting handlers who prioritized speed over sustainability. When he died in 1970, the man who changed rock forever left behind a surprisingly modest estate. His fortune would grow exponentially only after his death, turning Hendrix into one of music's cruelest ironies, a legend who made millions for everyone except himself. Janis Joplin, a voice worth millions. A life with nothing. Janis Joplin became the raw, emotional voice of a generation, commanding huge performance fees and record sales in the late 60s. But her lifestyle was chaotic, fueled by addiction, unstable management, and constant movement. Money came fast and disappeared faster. Janis had little interest in wealth or planning, focusing instead on intensity, freedom, and escape. When she died at just 27, her estate was shockingly small compared to her cultural value. Joplin's legacy would later generate millions, but she never lived to experience the security her talent deserved. Nick Drake, poverty in life, riches in death. Nick Drake sold almost no records while he was alive. His music, quiet, fragile, and deeply introspective, was ignored by the mainstream. Without touring income or commercial success, Drake lived a financially unstable life, supported mostly by family. He died in obscurity in 1974, virtually unknown outside small folk circles. Decades later, his songs would be rediscovered, licensed, and celebrated worldwide. Today, Nick Drake is a multi-million-selling artist, proof that recognition sometimes arrives too late to save the artist who created it. Pete Ham, Apple Records. Empty Pockets. Pete Ham was signed to Apple Records, backed by the Beatles themselves. Badfinger scored massive hits and earned serious money on paper. In reality, corrupt management, missing funds, and endless legal battles left Ham buried in debt. Despite global success, he struggled to pay bills and support his family. Overwhelmed by financial ruin and betrayal, Ham took his own life in 1975. His death became one of rock's darkest warnings: success means nothing when others control your earnings. Tommy Bolin, Fast Money. Faster collapsed. Tommy Bolin's rise was meteoric. When he joined Deep Purple in the mid-1970s, he stepped into one of the biggest bands on the planet. Suddenly, the money was real. Large advances, international tours, and industry recognition followed almost overnight. But the speed of his success became his greatest enemy. Bolin lacked a stable support system, and his personal struggles with addiction intensified under the pressure of constant touring and expectations. Tours expenses, legal issues, and substance abuse rapidly consumed whatever income he earned. Management focused on keeping the machine moving, not protecting the artist. By the time Bolin died at just 25 years old, the wealth was gone, the career unfinished, and the promise unrealized. His story stands as a brutal reminder that fame can arrive fast, but disappear even faster. Johnny Ramone, famous band, broken finances. The Ramones didn't just change music, they detonated it. Their stripped-down sound, relentless energy, and anti-glamour attitude ignited the global punk movement and inspired thousands of bands across decades. Yet behind the leather jackets, fast tempos, and legendary anthems was a financial reality far darker than their image suggested. Endless touring kept the band visible and culturally relevant, but it barely kept them afloat. Royalty checks were small, contracts were unfavorable, and profits flowed upward rather than to the artists themselves. Johnny Ramone was often portrayed as the band's most disciplined and business-aware member, someone who understood structure and control. Even so, he lived far more modestly than his legendary status implied. Despite selling millions of records and becoming immortal icons, the Ramones never saw the kind of financial security typically associated with rock legends. Punk reshaped culture, fashion, and attitude, but it did not reshape wealth distribution. The band became eternal symbols of rebellion. While its members, quietly paid the long-term price of an industry that profited immensely from their influence. Chris Bell, Big Star legendary album. Empty Wallet. Chris Bell helped create one of the most influential albums in rock history, yet he never witnessed its impact. Big Star's music would later be celebrated as a foundational blueprint for alternative and indie rock, influencing artists from R.E.M. to Radiohead. But during Bell's lifetime, the band's work was largely ignored. Label mismanagement, poor distribution, and complete industry indifference rendered Big Star almost invisible to the public. As success failed to materialize, Bell struggled financially and emotionally. He drifted between small jobs, unstable housing, and deep personal turmoil, carrying the weight of unrealized recognition. There were no meaningful royalties, no public acclaim, and no safety net to catch him as his mental health declined. When Bell died young, his name barely registered beyond a small circle of musicians. Only years later did the world fully understand what it had lost. His music became priceless, but his life ended in silence and poverty long before the applause arrived. Jeff Buckley, talent without time. Jeff Buckley was widely admired by critics, fellow musicians, and a devoted underground audience. Yet true commercial success remained frustratingly out of reach. His artistry was intense, vulnerable, and technically brilliant, qualities that earned deep respect but limited mainstream appeal. Buckley rejected industry formulas, refusing to compromise or simplify his vision for broader consumption. Artistic integrity mattered more to him than chart positions. As a result, financial stability never followed. Buckley lived modestly, moving between temporary homes and surviving on limited income while pouring everything he had into his music. His only studio album, Grace, slowly built a cult following but failed to generate significant wealth during his lifetime. When Buckley died suddenly in 1997, he left behind little material security but an enormous creative legacy. In the years after his death, his work would be rediscovered, celebrated, and monetized on a massive scale. His story remains one of rock's most painful ironies. The world finally listened, but too late. Lane Staley's success isolating itself, Alice in Chains stood at the center of the grunge explosion, selling millions of records and shaping the sound of an entire generation. On the surface, success seemed complete, but behind closed doors, Lane Staley was slowly disappearing. Addiction tightened its grip, pushing him away from touring, interviews, and even basic human connection. As the band's public presence continued, Staley's private world collapsed into isolation and decline. With no touring income and limited engagement with the industry, the wealth associated with Alice in Chains became meaningless to his everyday life. He lived alone, detached from both fans and finances, surrounded by silence rather than success. By the time he died in 2002, Staley had become a ghost of the icon fans remembered. His story exposes the darkest side of fame: how an artist can remain globally celebrated while privately drowning in poverty, illness, and loneliness. The spotlight never left, but the man behind it vanished long before his final day. The industry always wins a legacy of exploitation. These stories are not accidents. They are symptoms of a system designed to consume talent quickly and discard it quietly. In the music industry, contracts are often signed before artists understand their value, and management is trusted at the most vulnerable moments of success. Money arrives fast, disappears faster, and rarely finds its way back to the creator. When addiction, exhaustion, or decline sets in, the machine simply moves on. For many rock legends, poverty was never a reflection of failure. It was the cost of survival in an unforgiving system. Their music continues to generate massive revenue long after their lives ended in struggle. The songs live forever, echoing across generations. The artists, however, are too often left behind, protected, misunderstood, and financially broken. In the end, the industry endures. The legends pay the price. These stories remind us that fame does not equal security, and influence does not guarantee protection. The music industry celebrates legends, but it rarely safeguards the people behind the sound. While their songs continue to generate millions, many of the artists who created them never lived to see financial peace or recognition. Their struggles were not failures of talent, but consequences of exploitation, mismanagement, and trust placed in the wrong hands. As fans, we remember the music, but we must also remember the cost. Because behind every timeless song is a human story that deserves to be heard, understood, and never repeated.